They only appear when they need something. There is a certain kind of person who makes you feel chosen, not every day, not in the ordinary, unremarkable moments that make up most of a life. But when they do show up, they show up fully. The warmth is real. The laughter is genuine. The conversation reaches depths that most people never touch. And so you hold on to those moments. You collect them like evidence. You use them to defend the relationship whenever the quieter, more honest part of you begins to raise questions. But here is the question that cuts through all of it. When did they call? Not what did they say, not how it felt. When? Because time is something that cannot be faked. And the pattern of someone's attention tells you more about how they see you than any declaration of friendship ever could. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, wrote something that most people read and nod at without truly absorbing. He said that we should be slow to take people into our confidence, but that once we have done so, we should trust them completely. And the basis for that trust, he argued, was character, not charm, not chemistry. Character. And character is only ever revealed through pattern. So let us examine the pattern. Think about the last 10 times this person contacted you, not the last time that stands out because it was meaningful. All 10. Where were they reaching out from? What was happening in their life at that moment? Was there a problem that needed solving? A favor that needed asking? A situation that required your particular skill, your particular connection, your particular willingness to show up? And then ask the harder question. Where were they the last 10 times something was happening in your life? Not a crisis necessarily, just life. A small victory you wanted to share. A difficult week you wanted to process out loud. An ordinary afternoon where you simply would have welcomed the presence of someone who cared. Were they there? The philosopher Martin Buber made a distinction that I want you to sit with. He said there are two fundamental ways human beings relate to one another. He called them the I-thou relationship and the I relationship. In the I-thou relationship, you encounter the other person as a full human being, complex, irreducible, worthy of genuine attention. In the I-it relationship, the other person becomes an object, a means to an end, a thing to be used in the service of your own needs, and then set aside until the need returns. Most people who use others are not conscious of making this choice. That is what makes it so quietly devastating. They do not sit down and decide to treat you as a tool. They simply live in a way that prioritizes themselves so thoroughly that everyone else naturally falls into the category of resource. You are a good resource, perhaps the best they have. And so they return to you reliably, the way a person returns to a well, not because they love the well, but because the well has water. Here is how you know for certain. The next time they reach out, before you respond with your usual warmth, pause. Ask yourself what is happening in their life right now. Is there a problem brewing? A need forming? Something they are about to ask? And then, once the conversation unfolds, notice how long it takes before the ask arrives. Notice whether it was the point of the contact all along, or whether you were genuinely the point. You'll know. You already know. That is why you're here. There is a particular kind of loneliness that lives inside a one-sided relationship. It is not the loneliness of being alone. It is sharper than that. It is the loneliness of being present with someone who is not fully present with you, of giving your attention, your energy, your care to a person who is somewhere else, even while they are sitting across from you, of being in a conversation that is really a transaction dressed up in the language of connection. Aristotle said that a friend is another self, someone whose flourishing you desire as genuinely as you desire your own, someone who sees you and chooses to remain, not because you are useful, but because you are you. A person who only calls when they need something has not chosen you. They have chosen what you can do for them, and that is a distinction that deserves to change everything. You are not a well. You are not a resource. You are not a convenience. And the moment you stop being available on demand, you will discover very quickly who was there for you and who was only there for what you carried. The silence that follows that discovery will be uncomfortable, but it will also be the clearest answer you have ever received. They never ask how you are, and mean it. Pay attention the next time someone asks how you are, not to your answer, to them. Watch what their eyes do in the half second before you begin to speak. Watch whether their body leans in or stays precisely where it was. Watch whether the question was a door held open for you to walk through, or simply a formality, a social lubricant, the verbal equivalent of a doormat that exists only to be stepped over on the way inside. Because there is asking and there is inquiring, and the distance between those two things is the distance between a relationship that nourishes you and one that quietly hollows you out. The ancient Greeks had a concept they called eudaimonia, which is most often translated as happiness, but which really means something closer to flourishing, to live in full expression of your deepest capacities, to be genuinely well. And the philosophers who built their lives around this idea understood something that we have largely forgotten in our age of surface-level connection. They understood that you cannot flourish in isolation, that the quality of your inner life is inseparable from the quality of the relationships that hold it, that to be truly seen by another human being is not a luxury. It is a condition of becoming fully yourself, which means that a person who is incapable of genuine curiosity about you is not just a bad conversationalist. They are, in a very real sense, a barrier between you and your own flourishing. Think about the people in your life who you would describe as truly good listeners. What makes them good? It is not technique. It is not that they have mastered some set of conversational rules. It is something far simpler and far rarer. It is that when you speak, they are genuinely interested in what you are about to say. They have not already decided where the conversation is going. They have not already begun composing their response. They are present with you in real time, following the thread of your inner world with actual care. Now think about the person this video is bringing to mind. Think about the last time you tried to share something that mattered to you with them. Maybe a fear you had been carrying. Maybe an excitement you could not contain. Maybe just an ordinary difficulty that you needed another person to sit inside with you for a moment. What happened? Did they stay with you in it? Or did the conversation shift? Did a detail in your story remind them of a story of their own? Did your difficulty become a launching pad for their advice, their experience, their opinion on what you should do? Did you find yourself somewhere in the middle of what was supposed to be your moment, listening to them? This pattern is so common that most people have stopped recognizing it as a problem. They have internalized it as just the way conversations work. But it is not. It is a specific and consistent form of dismissal. It says, without ever saying it directly, that what is happening inside you is less interesting, less important, less worthy of sustained attention than what is happening inside them. The philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Read that slowly. She did not say money. She did not say time. She said attention. The full, undivided, genuinely curious turning of one mind toward another. She believed that to truly attend to another person was an act almost spiritual in its nature, because it required the temporary setting aside of yourself, your needs, your narrative, your agenda, in order to make space for someone else's reality to exist in full. The people who are using you are not capable of this. Not with you. Not consistently. Because genuine attention costs something. It requires a kind of inner stillness, a willingness to be moved by what you find. And a person who is fundamentally oriented toward their own needs cannot afford that cost. Every moment of genuine attention they give you is a moment they're not spending on themselves. And they have decided, somewhere beneath a level of conscious thought, that they are not willing to make that trade. So they ask how you are, because manners require it. And they nod while you answer, because appearance requires it. But they are not there. Not really. And part of you, the part that knows the difference between being seen and being looked at, has felt that absence every single time. You deserve someone who asks how you are because they genuinely want to know, because the answer matters to them, because your inner world is something they consider themselves fortunate to be allowed into. Anything less than that is not friendship. It is performance. And you have been an audience long enough. The relationship only grows in one direction. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that does not come from working too hard or sleeping too little. It comes from giving, consistently, generously, without return. Not because you were forced to, but because you believed each time that this time the exchange would be mutual, that this time the care would flow back, that the relationship, which has been leaning entirely in one direction for longer than you want to admit, would finally find its balance. It never does. And the most painful part is not the taking. The most painful part is the hope. The way you kept extending yourself, kept finding new reserves of patience and generosity and goodwill, kept telling yourself that the relationship was more complicated than it looked, that your needs were perhaps too much, that a good person gives without keeping score. But philosophy, at its most honest, has never confused generosity with self-erasure. And there is a difference that deserves to be named. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about duty, about the obligation to serve others, about the virtue of giving without expectation of return. And he is often quoted in ways that seem to justify exactly this kind of endless, unreciprocated giving. But what those selective quotations leave out is the full context of his thinking. Marcus was not describing a relationship between two individuals. He was describing a person's relationship to the world at large. And even in that context, he was clear that a person who gives without discernment does not become virtuous. They become depleted, and a depleted person serves no one well. Reciprocity is not a scoreboard. I want to be precise about that because there's a version of this conversation that becomes petty. that reduces human relationships to a ledger of debts and credits. That is not what I am describing. What I am describing is something more fundamental. Genuine relationships have a living energy at their center, a current that moves between two people, carrying care in both directions. Sometimes the current runs stronger from one side. Sometimes one person needs more than they can give, and the other holds more than they need. And the imbalance is temporary and understood and accepted with love. That is not a problem. That is what it means to walk through life with another person. The problem is when the current only ever runs one way. When you are always the one holding the other person through their difficulty. But when your difficulty arrives, you find yourself somehow alone in it. When you are always the one remembering, always the one reaching out, always the one who rearranges their life to accommodate, while the other person accommodates nothing. Think about the last time you were genuinely struggling, not performing struggle, not the kind of difficulty you could package into a story with a tidy resolution. Real difficulty, the kind that sits with you in the dark at 3 a.m. and does not offer easy answers. Who was with you? Not who said the right things, not who checked in once and then moved on. Who was actually present in the sustained, unglamorous work of sitting beside you in something hard. If the person this script is calling to mind was not there, ask yourself honestly how many times you have been there for them in their equivalent moments. I suspect the answer is different. I suspect you have shown up again and again because that is who you are, because you believe that love is something you demonstrate through presence, because the idea of someone you care about facing something difficult without support is genuinely unbearable to you. That quality in you is not a flaw. It is one of the most beautiful things about you. But it is being used. And the person using it is accounting on the fact that you will not stop to examine whether it is being returned. The philosopher Aristotle said that unequal relationships cannot be truly loving relationships because love requires a kind of equality of regard, not equality of circumstance or ability, but equality of care. Both people must hold the other's well-being as something that genuinely matters to them. Without that, what exists is not love. It is dependency wearing love's clothing. You are not responsible for carrying someone who has no intention of ever learning to carry themselves, or, when a time comes, to carry you. The relationship that only grows in one direction is not growing. You are growing smaller inside it, slowly, imperceptibly, in ways you may not even notice until the day you finally step back and look at what you have become while you were busy sustaining someone else. You are not built to be the permanent foundation of someone else's life. You were built to stand beside another person, not beneath them. The difference is everything. You feel exhausted after being with them, not energized. Your body knew before you did. It knew in the way your shoulders dropped slightly when you saw their name appear on your phone. It knew in the small, almost imperceptible hesitation before you pressed answer. It knew in the particular quality of tiredness that followed your time together, not the satisfying heaviness of meaningful effort, but something closer to depletion, a dimming, the feeling of having been present for hours and somehow returned to yourself with less than you had when you left. You explained it away. You said you were tired from work, tired from the week, tired in general. You found every reason except the true one, because the true one required you to look directly at something you were not yet ready to see. The body, the Stoics believed, is not separate from the mind. Marcus Aurelius and those who came before him understood that the physical sensations we experience in relation to other people are not noise to be filtered out. They are information, wisdom even. The body registers what the rational mind, with its extraordinary capacity for justification and loyalty and hope, is sometimes too invested to acknowledge. What your body has been telling you is this: this person takes more than they give. And the mathematics of that equation, sustained over months or years, produces exactly the feeling you have been carrying. Let me explain what is actually happening, because I think naming it clearly will help you trust what you already know. When you are in the presence of someone who genuinely cares about you, something opens. You feel seen, which is different from being looked at. You feel heard, which is different from being listened to. There is an exchange happening beneath the level of words, an energetic reciprocity, a mutual recognition that says, I am glad you exist, and I am glad to be here with you. That exchange is not abstract. It produces something real in you, a lightness, a sense of expansion, the feeling of having been met. When you are in the presence of someone who is using you, the exchange runs in one direction. You are extending yourself toward them, offering your attention, your energy, your care, your presence. And what returns is not equivalent. What returns is the performance of connection, the appearance of reciprocity without its substance, and maintaining your end of that performance, smiling, engaging, giving, while simultaneously receiving nothing of comparable depth, is exhausting in a way that goes beyond ordinary tiredness. The psychologist and philosopher William James argued that our sense of self is not fixed. It expands and contracts in relation to the people around us. In the presence of those who genuinely affirm us, who meet us as full human beings, the self expands. We become more alive, more present, more capable of depth and creativity and connection. In the presence of those who diminish us, even subtly, even unintentionally, the self contracts. We become smaller, quieter, less sure of the value of our own inner life. You have been contracting, not dramatically, not in ways that anyone from the outside would necessarily notice, but slowly, over time, in a particular way that water shapes stone. The version of you that exists around this person is not your full self. It is a managed, careful, diminished version of you, one that has learned through long experience to take up less space, to need less, to give more, to make peace with the asymmetry because the alternative felt like loss. But here's the philosophical question I want to leave you with. What are you actually losing if you let this relationship go? You're losing the comfort of familiarity. You're losing the version of this person that appears in your best memories, the one they show you just often enough to keep you hopeful. You are losing the story you have been telling yourself about what this relationship is and what it might eventually become. What you are keeping is yourself. And I do not mean that in the motivational poster sense. I mean it philosophically. The self is not a fixed, indestructible thing. It requires conditions in order to flourish. It requires relationships in which it is genuinely valued. It requires the experience, regular and reliable, of being in the presence of someone who leaves you more alive than they found you. Aristotle said that the good life is not a destination. It is a practice. It is something you inhabit daily through the choices you make about how you spend your time and with whom you spend it. Every hour you spend feeling smaller, emptier, more exhausted than you should be in the company of someone who claims to care about you is an hour you are not practicing the good life. It is an hour you are spending in service of someone else's comfort at the expense of your own becoming. You have been tired for long enough.